It is really important that when students are learning about data, that they learn how to pose good questions. And if you don't have students create questions, there's no way they can become experts in forming questions about the data that they're looking at. The more that they form their own questions, the better they are in interpreting questions that you pose or that others pose or that the SOL poses on the test. So this is a process that's really important for students to get good at. So we're going to look at 6 different types of questions, and I'm going to pause on each slide and let you generate questions based off of either a K2 level, a 3-5 level, or a 6-8 level. And you'll have to do each of those. And these will be in a forum that you'll be able to see what other people are posting as well. So please do not post a question that someone else has already posted. But you only need to post one in each of those grade bands. So for this first one, generalizing, this is where students find the general or overall character of a set of data, as opposed to specific characteristics. So they're broad. So the question might be, what? Tell me about this graph. So what I'd like you to do now is on the right side of the screen, go ahead and add a question for K1. Then add a question for, K2. Then add a question for 3-5, and then add a question for 6-8. Please read through the questions that have already been posted and create a new question. Okay, so the next type of question that we're going to look at is comparing and contrasting questions. And this is when you have students look at the data and discuss the characteristics or data in the graph that different pieces have in common as well as differences. So now I'd like you to go ahead and write a question that would be for K2, then do one for 3-5, and then do one for 6-8. Make sure you read through the questions that have already been posted and edit your question so that it is unique. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and look at describing questions. And these are questions that are looking at the shape or the trends that are displayed in the data. So go ahead and create a question that would be appropriate for a K2 student, then a 3-5, then a 6-8. And make sure you do not duplicate any questions that have already been written. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and look at interpreting questions. And this is when you have kids looking at what is displayed in the relationship to the question that you're asking. So they're a little more difficult for kids to answer, just like it is in reading, when kids have to interpret some reading passage. That's difficult for them. So right now I want you to go ahead and write a question that would be a question students could answer to interpret a graph in either K2, and then do one for 3-5, and then do one for 6-8. Okay, so the next type of question we're going to look at is summarizing. This is when students look at the data and they look at the main points and they see what data is displayed and they come up with a concise explanation of the results. Kind of like when they do in reading where they summarize a paragraph or a story. This is questions that cause them to summarize the data that they're looking at. Please do this for K2, 3-5, and 6-8. Okay, and then the last type of questions that we're going to look at is predicting. And this is a really hard one for students to do, and they need lots of practice with creating these questions as well as answering them. So predicting is when you the act of using the data to predict the results of additional sampling or extending the conclusions beyond the original sample to a larger group. So predicting in a story what's going to happen next, kids have a really hard time with that. And they have that same difficult time with data. So it's really important that we have kids practice this as well as you practice this. Go ahead and create a predicting question that would be appropriate for K2, then 3-5, then 6-8. Okay, on this last slide, what I'm going to have you do is on the left side, I want you to go ahead and share which one of these types of questions was the easiest for you to come up with and which one was the most difficult, as well as which grade level. So in K2, which one was the easiest and most difficult? In 3-5, which one was the easiest and most difficult? And in 6-8, what was the easiest and most difficult? And provide some rationale as to why you think that. I'm really interested in seeing your responses and seeing how you do with these. This will conclude this part of the lesson, and we'll look to see you soon.